Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the online Digging Deeper series. I'm Amy David with the Friends of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, and tonight we have an all-star panel discussing skiing and riding in the areas outside of the Sun Valley ski resort boundary on Bald Mountain or the Baldy OB. Scott Savage, director of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, will be moderating a panel, and he will introduce our guests here in a few minutes. But before we turn it over to Scott, I'd like to say a huge thank you on behalf of everyone at the Avalanche Center for all of those of you who have showed up to watch and participate in our discussion tonight, and for all of the donations that we have gotten leading up to the holidays. It's definitely greatly appreciated, and I hope that you can see the benefit of your contributions. So for anyone who doesn't know, the Friends of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center is a nonprofit organization partnered with the Avalanche Center and that supports the mission of the Sawtooth Avi Center through education, outreach, and fundraising events to provide over half of the annual budget for the incredible products that the Avi Center offers, from forecasting to weather stations to the website and much more. So this holiday season, we are so grateful to have received a generous Christmas gift from two different donors of $5,000 each. And this is a matching grant. So if we as a community can raise $10,000 by January 1st, we will receive that matching donation for a total of $20,000 going directly back to the Avalanche Center. So if you're in a position to donate any amount, $10 and beyond, it's going to a really great cause, and your donations right now in this time period will be doubled by that matching grant. So if you'd like to donate to the Friends of the Avalanche Center, we have a Venmo account. It's at sawtooth-avalanche. Or you can just go to the website, sawtoothavalanche.com, and in the upper right corner, you'll see a donate button, and you can click that. Or visit the Friends webpage to see what we're all about, and then donate. So greatly appreciated. Thank you all so much. But let's get down to business. So the main event tonight, the Baldy OB, you can comment or ask questions throughout the panel discussion by typing into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or clicking the raise hand button. And one of our forecasters, Ben Vandenbos, and myself will be moderating behind the scenes those questions and making sure that Scott sees them and he can ask our panelists or chime in himself. So we want this to be really interactive, so make sure you type in your questions, anything on the tip of the tongue, just fire away, and we will get those out in the open. Now is the time to ask as many questions as you can. So I would like to turn it over to Scott, the director of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center, and he's going to introduce our panelists tonight.
All right, thanks so much, Amy. First thing I'm going to do is go through a little PowerPoint like we usually do at the beginning of these Digging Deepers. All right, can someone let me know if we can see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Awesome. So we're going to do a super brief update on conditions. This is taken on Christmas Eve. That's going to peak the Northwest Bowl, so a lot of west facing and some northwest facing aspects. Unless you've been on Mars or a different continent for the last week or so, you know that we've gotten a whole lot of snow, probably 2 or 3 feet conservatively since this photo was taken. So when the skies finally do clear Friday or Saturday, you may not even be able to tell that this thing happened. It'll be interesting to see how much evidence there is of it. But the short story is the snowpack still adjusting to what was another really huge load, you know, roughly 2.5 to over 5 inches of water in that storm that just ended yesterday or the day before. So it's going to take some time for the snowpack to adjust to that and get to the point where we're not worried about those layers deeper in the snowpack failing. It just needs some time off. I'd encourage everyone to read the forecast every day because conditions are going to obviously change as they always do. We're still getting or seeing or getting reports of fresh avalanches pretty much daily at this point, but I think that'll hopefully slow down the pace of natural avalanche activity. And then we'll also be doing a fresh weekend update on Friday that gives you a good recap of what happened in the week before, and what to expect going into the weekend for expected avalanche conditions. So with that, sorry that's so brief, but we want to make sure we save plenty of time for our special edition here with all our rock star guests of panelists for the discussion tonight. So what we're going to be doing tonight, we're going to touch on a whole bunch of different topics associated with skiing the Baldy OB or side country. I'm going to spin through a brief PowerPoint here that kind of gives us a little bit of an overview of the terrain we're talking about, some things that have happened there, and just hit on a few points that some of the panelists wanted to make sure that we got kind of out on the table right away before we start asking them questions. And speaking of that, that's something right now to start thinking about questions you have for our cast of panelists. We're going to give preference to the live ones. It's always great to have people asking, in person as much as you can be on Zoom, but in person live questions. And if you're not comfortable with that, you can still, to do that, you click the raise hand button, and then one of our wizards behind the scenes, Amy or Ben, will call on you or bring it to our attention. I'll call on you and ask you to unmute so you can ask your question. If you're uncomfortable doing that, you can use the Q&A function and type it in and ask a written question. We may answer that live with one of the panelists, and feel free to direct it to a specific panelist by name if you want that question addressed by someone in particular. Or Ben or one of the other folks behind the scenes may just answer it in writing if it's they may just type a response for you if it's something that's easy to do that way. So with that, I'll get rolling here. So what is side country? It's kind of a little bit of a contentious term, whether you call it side country or backcountry next to a ski area, or the OB or out of bounds. That link up there, and I'll ask Ben to maybe put that in the Q&A as well, but that's an article that I and some other Avalanche Center folks wrote several years ago that I think side country is a really good term because it is really specific, the terrain right outside a ski area boundary. It's unpatrolled and uncontrolled. So what does that mean? Unpatrolled means, they're not doing sweeps. They're not checking to make sure everyone's okay. They're not marking anything. And it's uncontrolled, meaning there's no avalanche mitigation work being done there. So you're on your own you're dealing with what could be backcountry snowpack avalanche conditions and are many times of the year. So from that standpoint, it's the backcountry, unpatrolled, uncontrolled. But it's lift served. And that makes it really, really easy to get in there and to do laps, and just changes your mentality. If you're going out for a full day in the backcountry, you're usually going to do, in some remote area, whether you're skiing in or sledding in, you're probably going to do a little bit more homework than you do if you're going skiing at Baldy and just yo-yoing, doing laps on lifts. So it changes how people approach things for sure. The fact that it is lift access entirely and takes no physical effort to get into that terrain outside of just skiing or snowboarding. It oftentimes it can have a backcountry snowpack. So early season, like now, the snowpack there is going to act like, and behave like a backcountry snowpack. In the spring, when we start getting wet issues, same thing, that it's going to behave just like a backcountry snowpack. And when we get really big storms, even in the middle of winter, yes, ski traffic and heavy ski compaction does things to the snowpack. You can dig up one of our Digging Deepers, the recordings on YouTube that we did last year or the year before, where we touched on ski compaction to learn more about that. But it's not 100% effective. So when you get really big storms, even in February or March, you can have layers that you know, in this within the ski area, you can pretty much forget about them, but out there you may not be able to. So the snowpack will behave like the backcountry much more so than it will the ski area. Even though you're right on the other side of a rope line 5 feet away, it's a really different snowpack. And then what I hinted at before there, just the familiarity, complacency, and the lack of evaluation or planning that results from that super easy access where you're just sitting in a chair to get uphill. You're not skinning up or riding your snowmobile and looking at things and, you know, consciously making decisions about, is our plan good, where we decided we're going to go ski X or go ride, you know, run X. You just don't have that. Things happen really fast when you're riding on a chair and having fun. And that photo is just a good reminder. It's a neat program that the Sun Valley Ski Patrol and Sun Valley Resort put in to try to get people to think about that. And it has a little beacon checker, so that's near where you would leave the ski area boundary up by the top of the mountain there. So it's a beacon checker and just gives you some basic information to, hey, get the forecast, check it out. Ideally, people are skiing with a partner, beacon, shovel, and a probe. So I would argue that side country, it is different than the backcountry, and it's actually more dangerous than the backcountry because you have backcountry terrain, backcountry snowpack, but ski area or effectively living room decisions to make, where you're in the ski area, you're used to someone else making your terrain choices for you because they're going to say, I mean, when you're skiing in a ski area, the mitigation folks there at Sun Valley, they're really good at what they do. So things are going to be very, very, very safe. You're used to that when you're in bounds, and then just going out through a little gate, ducking a rope. It's just a simple, innocent little decision that can have really huge implications because you're entering a totally different world. So those are the reasons why I think side country is a good word for, or term to use to describe that terrain. And it is something that a lot of the times the combination of the mental and decision-making aspects and the backcountry aspects of it is actually worse. It's kind of the worst of two worlds as far as what it does to increase the risk that we're going to have when we're actually out there, or that we might take. So this is looking at what we're going to focus on tonight. This is the more northerly facing terrain, just outside the ski area boundary at Sun Valley or on Bald Mountain, dumps into the Warm Springs drainage, and commonly referred to as the burn. Talking with Skooter and Nicole and some of the other folks, it seems like that's a pretty commonly accepted term. That fire went through there in 2007, and a lot of burned trees that are a really defining characteristic of the terrain. So looking at one of three quick incidents we're going to cover. So this is back in February 2014 in the double lot slide path. This is looking up. And this one was a solo skier. Kind of later in the afternoon, it resulted in all kinds of very serious, potentially life-altering broken bones. And the person was really fortunate that they were able to get a call out. They had to call several times because they didn't have any reception with the cell phone, and eventually got through. The ski patrol was able to go down and get them. Skooter and Nicole will probably talk about that at some point this evening, but they don't just automatically go if they get a call for help from in there, because it's not within the ski area boundary. This is the backcountry, so they need to call the sheriff. The sheriff will ask them, will you please go and help this person? And if they have the resources available, and if it's safe enough, they deem it safe enough to go in, then they will assist with that rescue, because they're going to be way faster than having search and rescue come up from the bottom. But it's important to recognize that that's not a given. You can't assume that someone's going to get in there to get you. And it's going to take a really long time to, but the person was dragged through trees, banged off a whole bunch of them, and broke a bunch of bones in a slide path over there. So looking at the top of those slide paths where that accident and the next one that we're going to look at happened, you see a whole bunch of trees. That's kind of one of the really predominant features of this piece of terrain in the out of bounds area over there, just outside the ski area boundary to the skiers left of the international run over at Baldy. And Skooter asked me to kind of contrast that to some of the other places in the Western US that have side country or backcountry via the ski area. And I worked at Big Sky for about 20 years before I shifted gears and went to the Avalanche Center world. So this is back, I'm dating myself here, but probably circa 2005 or 7, somewhere around there. And this is the gate if you're leaving the ski area boundary at Big Sky, going, you get off the tram and ski out to the skiers right and out past Liberty Bowl, which is kind of the easier way down. That's on your left. And you can see it's pretty obvious avalanche terrain. So it's a really different world than what you have at the top of Bald Mountain, where you can kind of ease into things getting off the top. And just looking at that on the skier's left-hand side, even if someone hasn't taken a level 1 or a level 2 avalanche class, they tend to understand that that's significant terrain. And the stuff on the skier's right is the same thing. You're kind of going out a little bit of a, not a knife edge ridge, but an exposed ridge line. It's really windy. And it's just pretty obvious, especially for people, whether it's tourists or less experienced skiers who just aren't that comfortable in alpine terrain. It's a different place where they're out of their comfort zone. So it makes them think twice about leaving the boundary compared to the terrain at Baldy. And that's just looking what's off the skier's right-hand side. Again, just obvious avalanche terrain. So if we look at that compared to the next accident we're gonna look at, which was back December 15th in the Christmas Eve area. So kind of right at the top of what locals would refer to as Grandma's Shack, or that little terrain park, just below the Lookout restaurant. If you pop in there, it's just nice powder skiing down to here, and then it rolls over a little bit, but it's really innocent looking. And this is taken the day of, so just immediately after this accident happened. There were 2 tracks in there, and those tracks are not the skiers that, it was one skier who was caught, but a party of 2. And that's not their tracks. They were over on the skier's left, skiing that ridge that's a lot safer. So on the left edge of this photo, because they didn't want to expose themselves to the slide path. That's the crown right below that last photo. So there's right over that rollover right there. You can see the dead tree. That's where it broke. The danger on this day was high. In the previous accident, the danger was considerable. This day was high, and they were down several hundred vertical feet below where this crown formed when the avalanche struck one of the 2 members of that party, and then again dragged that person through trees for a kind of long, ugly ride. This is looking up at what they had come through. That's about halfway down, and then they went through more of that for about another few hundred vertical feet. This person, again, it was fortunate they were young and really strong, but could have been for sure life-altering, permanent life-altering injuries. I think this person recovered fairly well. So one of the things that I think is really important out there is just the consequences of the terrain, where, and part of it's probably my bias that I spent a lot of time at Big Sky and skiing in alpine terrain, where you tend to have clean run-out zones that gradually fan out. And you're just not going to hit a whole lot when you're on your way down, compared to, this is that double aught accident looking back up, the one from 2015, 14 or 15. And you're going to hit things. And when you're caught in an avalanche, if it's sizable, you're going to be moving anywhere from 30 to maybe 60 miles an hour. So just picture getting your truck going up to 30, 40, 50, 60 miles an hour and get really close to some trees and jump out of the bed and hit a tree and see what that feels like. And that's what's going to happen to you in this. So whether you get buried or not, a lot of the times is secondary to what happens to you on the way down in treed terrain like this. It's just, it can be really spooky. It scares me. Then the last one we'll look at here before we get going with the panel is the most recent accident we had. And this one, fortunately, there were no injuries, but this was back in January a few years ago in the Bruce's path, which is a little further down the ridge, so maybe a third of the way down from the Lookout restaurant down towards the base area. And it was two individuals who were just kind of diving in, making a few turns, and then cutting back up to the ridge, back to the ski area boundary, and then they dive in, make a few turns. This was during an avalanche warning. It was incredibly dangerous, and they're literally like 20 feet. You can see the rope there. They're just right below it. And the two of them they dove in, made a few turns together. Both were caught, both were fully buried, and both managed to dig themselves out on their own. They're fortunate that they didn't get dragged down further and buried a little deeper. It could have easily been a double fatality with that accident. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing. And it's time to introduce our rock star cast here of panelists. We'll wait till they start popping up here so I can see their faces. There we go. I saw Harlen and Nicole first. So with us, we have four folks. We have Harlen Collins. Harlen's been skiing on Baldy for 25 years. He ski raced for 12 years, a lot of it with the Sun Valley Ski Education Foundation and then in college. And he's been coaching full time for the Sun Valley Ski Education Foundation for 6 seasons. Harlen's an avid backcountry skier and sledder as well. Sorry to hear about your sled yesterday, Harlen. I hope it turns out okay. And when he's not ripping single track in the summer, he's a commercial fisherman up in Bristol Bay. So he also recently, as many of you probably know, did a short film remake of The Deer Hunter, a classic 1970s movie. He did that earlier this month at Baldy. Then sitting next to him, we have Nicole Jorgensen. And Nicole's proud member of the Sun Valley Ski Patrol. She's in her 6th year up there working at Baldy and has worked as a member of the snow safety team for several years. She's an avid backcountry skier and sends us plenty of great observations from really, really cool places that she goes. And I have to admit that her observations and photos usually make me really jealous while I'm in the office in the morning, looking at where she's been in the Sawtooth and all kinds of really cool exploits. Then we have below him, probably doesn't need much of an introduction, but Crazy Karl Fostvedt. And I didn't mention, Harlen, you're born in Sun Valley, or this area, I believe, Wood River Valley, right? It's impressive, 3. So Crazy Karl was born in Sun Valley. He's been riding Baldy for about 25 years. And he got a degree in environmental studies from the University of Utah. And then he put his degree to use by becoming a 2-time King of Corbett's, as many people probably dreamed of doing back there at the University of Utah. So as most of you know, Karl's a professional skier, filmmaker, and entrepreneur. He's the owner of Native Earth Productions. And sorry, I can't pronounce it like it's supposed to be pronounced on air, Karl, because I'll get in trouble. There might be kids watching, but FKN SNDR. So it's Blank Sender Industries. And then also with us, we have Skooter Gardiner. So Scooter was, again, born in Sun Valley. He's been skiing Baldy since the 70s. And working on Baldy since the early 90s. He's been the snow safety director for the Sun Valley Ski Patrol for almost 10 years, I believe. So about as long as I've been here, eight years, something like that, right, Scooter? Scooter likes storm cycles, coffee, and tequila, and all things spicy. And he dislikes bad coffee and bad attitudes. So I also have to mention that Scooter served on the board of the Friends of the Sawtooth Avalanche Center for many years. So thanks a lot, Scooter, for everything you've done to help out our cause and what's going on in the Avalanche Center world in the Wood River Valley. So we're going to do a quick around the horn to see if any of you have some opening comments. Let's see, Karl, you're unmuted. So Karl, do you have anything to kick us off here before we start taking questions from the crowd? We'll go around the horn and let everyone have a quick say, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Hey, Scott. Yeah, thanks a ton for having us on. Really excited to be a part of this. And I think for me, the biggest thing with the side country terrain, or at least for myself over the years, has been patience. And I didn't get into a lot of this terrain until my late 20s, 30s. And there have been years where we have to write off the side country terrain entirely, and years it's just not worth it, which is, it's tough because you're riding that terrain one year and you're just fiending to get back there. And then we don't get a good snowpack and you just got to pump the brakes. And yeah, that's been something that we all want to ski powder till we're old like Scott. So let's
Exactly.
yeah. Well, yeah, that's it for now.
Awesome. Thanks, Karl. So how about you, Nicole?
Yeah, thanks again for having us, Scott. You kind of touched on this, and Karl too, with your little patience part, but our side country is really spectacular, but also kind of unique in a lot of ways compared to other resorts. You kind of touched on this, Scott, but the fact that you can take a lift up, kind of easily duck under a boundary rope and then get back on a lift and go right back to the side country is, you don't see that at all resorts. And then the fact that you don't have like a designated gate or beacon checker or a place where someone is, making sure and keeping you accountable for having the gear and the knowledge of where you're going makes our side country unique. And then just some food for thought, that fact that we may go several years not getting to ski a lot of this terrain, and then all of a sudden it's all in and it's all covered. I think it's worth thinking about how that affects us and our human factors and decision making, and hopefully that can kind of spark some conversation tonight. But as probably most of you are locals watching this, I think it's important to also think about what responsibility we have when we're out there and when we go out there, whether that's demonstrating to kids or tourists or whoever that may be, what example we're setting and what that means to everyone around us as well.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nicole. Well said. Harlen, while you're there next to Nicole, what do you have for us for some opening comments?
Hard to follow those two intros, but thanks for having us, Scott. I think this is a great discussion to have. I'm an avid burn user as well, and I didn't use it at all last year just because of the conditions going on out there. But when it's going on back there and when it's good, I do enjoy using that. And when I am using it, I enjoy seeing people with proper gear and people making the right decisions. And I think it's good that we're all coming together to hopefully get on the same page and start making sure we are using those proper decisions together. But yeah, stoked to be here. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. And Skooter, last but not least, what do you have for us?
Oh, well, Scott, the Avalanche Center, thanks for this opportunity. Somewhere in the discussion tonight, I'd like to dig a little deeper, if you will, into just the understanding between the difference of our inbounds closure ropes and our ski area boundary ropes. And in addition to that, I would also like to solicit a little feedback into maybe how, as a resort or as a ski patrol, we might be able to better educate people prior to them going out of bounds.
Awesome. Well, I think we don't have any live questions that are in the queue quite yet. So why don't you hit that first one? I think that's a really important point, that what is the difference between the inbounds closures and the out of bounds closures? Like how do people tell the difference, and what are the differences?
Oh, okay. Well, both rope closures have their own unique set of rules to respect. And it's up to the skier, snowboarder, the guest to understand the difference between the two. If you see a rope on Bald Mountain, there will be a sign nearby indicating if it's an inbounds area closure or a ski area boundary. And the inbounds closures, they state closed, enter through closed gates only, or avalanche control area, enter through open gates only. And then our ski area boundary signage says simply ski area boundary, or ski area boundary, no ski patrol or avalanche control beyond this point. Both come with a, like, we put the onus on the user to understand the difference between the two. Our inbounds closures are prohibited and enforced by Blaine County Ordinance number 86. We take them seriously in the resort, but areas can be closed for a number of different reasons. We close areas for snowmaking construction and or just snowmaking, snowcats, or winching operations, lifts that simply aren't working at that time of the day, unsafe conditions, avalanche mitigation, and time. Sunrise area, Seattle Ridge, upper bowls and lower bowls all close at 2:45. And then the lower Frenchman's area closes at 3:30. And these are hanging drainages, and it's just a matter of operations as we try to close the mountain from kind of south to north, if you will. And it's from a safety standpoint, we just close those areas, we sweep them, and we don't want to leave anyone behind. So obviously ducking under those closure ropes it can have its consequences. The ski area boundaries, they, how do I state this? It's open, and most of the land beyond the ski area boundary is public land. There are a few exceptions, especially in the sunrise terrain. As you get down into the glades, there's some private property on the right-hand side of that ski area boundary. But users, and this is probably the meat of this discussion, or part of it, users going under those ropes assume the same risk as if they were skiing in the backcountry.
Awesome. Thanks, Scooter. So while we're waiting for some live questions, and I really want to encourage that. So, everyone needs to, don't be bashful. We want people to get on the air and take your pick, whoever you want to ask a question to, and bring it. Bring the heat, so to speak, right? So while we're waiting for that, I have one, and I'll start with asking Karl with this one. Have you had any scary moments or close calls when you're out there in the burn, skiing and riding, you or any of your partners that you're frequently skiing with?
Yeah, the close calls that we've had have been non-avalanche related, more related just to all the timber and all the obstacles back there. And I think it's just high consequence terrain back there, and it takes a lot of snow to fill that stuff in. If you want to ski in the burn, a good time to make that decision is in the summer months, where you can go hiking around up there, get a good feel for what might be a good route, what route is going to end in pickup sticks where you're just struggling to get your way out, especially if you're on a snowboard. You can definitely find amazing routes, but also there are areas, skis and boards, where you can just get tangled in down timber and pick up sticks down there. I've seen people hit logs, I saw someone hit a stump this year and get, lose both their skis, get chucked over the bars. And thankfully I haven't had any avalanche incidents out there, but there's just a lot of hazards out there. And if you want to ski back there, I just highly suggest doing your homework, get out there in the summer and go walk the terrain while there's no avalanche hazard. As soon as there's snow on the ground, there's avalanche hazard, and if you don't have good routes back there, you can just really end up in a mess. So yeah.
Thanks, Karl. How about you, Harlen?
Luckily I have not had any incidences back there in the burn. I think that all goes towards having like good mentors who have been out there before, having someone kind of show you the ropes, show you the routes, kind of show you where you are is huge. But luckily for me, everything's been safe and kosher. So yeah. And
I guess another angle of it then, just as and probably a lot of the time that Scooter and Nicole spend would be during rescues and during evaluations. But have either of you or has the patrol ever had any close calls out there? Scooter or Nicole, either of you want to take that one?
Anything? I mean, we really do listen to and watch what the Sawtooth Avalanche Center is saying. And when they start ramping up their hazard advisory to considerable or hot or extreme, we definitely put the word around the patrol that, you know, conditions are unstable. Let's be careful. I've never had an avalanche close call in the side country, but I have certainly responded to rescues where I felt very fortunate the skier or snowboarder survived. It's, as Scotty mentioned earlier, it's I mean, if you had the opportunity to ski or snowboard anywhere, you probably, in the backcountry, you probably would not pick these reed chutes with down trees. Cool.
Yeah, I also have not had any close calls out there. I'd say, especially when I'm working, but also when I'm not, I don't want to be the person that if I think there's a chance it's, you know, not a good idea to go out there, I don't want to be the one putting a track out there for others to potentially follow. Another thing that came to mind talking about close calls is, you know, when I do see people going out there and it's unstable conditions, high avalanche danger, I'm thinking to myself, well, if I have to go out there and rescue them, I'm gonna have to cross under so much avalanche terrain. Like I don't want to be the person to do that. So that's just something that comes to mind with close calls as well.
Yeah, it's really interesting terrain where when you're leaving, for those in the audience that aren't that familiar with it, if you're skiing one of the places more on the skier's left, to get back out, you're potentially crossing underneath many avalanche paths, and you're exposed to whatever, you know, Yahoo number 1, Yahoo number 2, thing number 4, whatever anyone in the world is doing up above you, which is just not a position you want to be in. You don't want to have the fate of, you know, your fate in someone else's hands, which is what happened in that Christmas Eve accident where someone got hurt because of what people above them were doing. So we're going to wrap up this poll. I think it's pretty interesting. The first poll of the night there with Baldy OB close calls. I think it's interesting that 16% of the people who responded, which is a pretty high number, have had more than one close call out there. And when you add the two together, a quarter of the people out there watching tonight have had a close call, which is, if you do the math, if you've already had a close call, how many close calls are you going to have until you or whoever you're with gets hurt in terrain like that? So it's a kind of a spooky number to me that 25% of the people here have had a close call, at least one. We have a question here. This one's for no one in particular, so I think this one, I'm going to ask Nicole and Scooter first, and then we'll let Harlen and Karl chime in afterwards. But someone from the audience asks, where would, in quotes, relatively safer areas be for those who are looking to dabble in the Sun Valley side country with appropriate gear and experienced partners? So where would you kind of go, maybe with, you know, training wheels, so to speak? Are there any areas like that?
Nicole?
You want me to go?
Sure.
I was gonna suggest maybe the terrain kind of on the right side of the boundary rope in the new Sunrise expansion area. So if you're heading out towards Sunrise Bowl, kind of the terrain that was called or still is called Turkey Bowl is relatively safe, although we have seen conditions where there have been wind slabs that have released out there, and it's definitely still avalanche terrain, but that could be a fairly easy to maneuver and navigate area to maybe start poking out of the boundary. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that, Scooter?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to see people kind of stay within our boundaries and have that element of safety. I mean, I understand what they're asking. I think our kind of ungladed and ungroomed terrain in Sunrise Bowl proper is a really good opportunity, and especially Cold Spring Chutes and in the trees, really good opportunity to kind of sample their skills and hone their skills. It's not skied as much as you might think, and it's a good powder, and we're always a phone call away. I think that's where I would begin to point people, and then maybe looking on the Sawtooth Avalanche Center site and trying to gain some level 1 skill sets and build from there. I'll leave it at that.
All right, thanks, Scooter. So we have a live question from Corey. Are you out there, Corey? If you are, if you can press on mute and ask a question.
Hey, thanks for hosting this. This is great. Quick question for you guys. How often are you digging pits when you're heading out to either the burn or just like side country off of Baldy versus just kind of relying on Sawtooth Abbey forecasting, visual observations, and, you know, just kind of like discussion amongst your group?
Great question, Corey. Let's send that one to either Harlen or Karl. Looks like Harlen's unmuted. He's ready to go. And then Karl can add anything that he wants to after.
Yeah, good question, Corey. I feel pretty comfortable answering this one. I think especially on a year like this year, we have been digging quite a few pits just because there's spatial variability out there, and facets can be found in different aspects and different elevations. And also to add to that, when we're the first tracks of the season on it, it's especially important to make sure we're digging pits to see what's going on and we're not dealing with rider compaction. I think that's super important early season, and especially a season like this year when we're getting rapid building of a snowpack in a short amount of time, and then dealing with that spatial variability. But yeah, we've dug quite a few pits already just this season to make sure we're staying on top of things and we're not getting caught with our pants down.
Yeah, and I'd say we're relying heavily on the Abbey Center reports and getting intel from them before we've even dropped into the burn or gone beyond the rope line, because a lot of those times, even you get to the point where you can dig a pit in the area, you're already pretty committed. So yeah, if we can even dig a pit back there, it's a good year.
Right. Cool.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Oh, we got another poll up there. How often do you dig pits in the backcountry? It's for everyone who's watching. So kind of a follow-up question and that we have here is, what is your process and group discussion before deciding to go into the side country? So maybe Karl, how about you go first on this one?
I mean, as soon as the first snowfall comes in, we're keeping tabs back there and have a pretty close-knit group that I like to get back there. And one issue we do have in the Baldy side country is group size and managing your group. And you know, there is a difference between a group and a team. And with a lot of the people I go back there with, I feel like we're a team. We've been watching every snow that comes in, checking the Abbey Center, and making our plan and talking about it in the weeks and days leading up to getting into that terrain.
Harlen, you have anything to add to that, or anything that you do differently that you would say?
No, I thought Karl did a good job answering that. I think just patience is huge, and just making sure that you're definitely going over the checklist before going back there. And, you know, simple stuff like making sure your beacon works. Maybe not just using the beacon checker that's offered there, but also taking it out of your pocket, making sure you don't have errors, making sure it's picking up your friends, and just making sure you're covering everything, all the details before just doing that simple duck of the rope. And then also just checking in with your group and make sure this is where we're going. I've been with groups where all of a sudden everybody's everywhere, and you're kind of lost, and you kind of like, where are you at? So it's important to make sure this is where we're going. Let's stick to that plan. And also using like radios is huge. If you're going to go back out there, it's good practice for not only in the burn, but when you're going out elsewhere in the backcountry, to hone those skills, hone your radio chatter together, and kind of keep things tight.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense. Kind of a follow-up question that I have on for both of you, for Harlen and Karl, is that, so that's your decision-making process for going out in the side country. Does that differ from how you would approach a day in the true backcountry, whether you're going sledding, sled skiing, or skiing? Do you have a different routine, or is it pretty similar?
I think for me, they start similar, but with Baldy and with the lift access terrain, it's really easy for that plan to change. You get down to Warm Springs, someone's on the bridge, all of a sudden now you've got a 4 or 5 person group instead of a 3-person group. Sometimes you'll have 2 4-person groups that all of a sudden are lapping at the same time, and then you have an 8-person group, and that's just something that we want to avoid back there. So there's a lot of logistics and social dynamics that need to be navigated to be back there safely, and figuring out ways to split those groups up. And you know, there's just so many frothers out there stoking to go get powder, and sometimes it's easy to just get caught up and all right, just, you know, Ed can join the group and now we got 7, but then no one. But it's just, you know, you really want to keep it to 3, 4 people back there and keep it tight and have those radios like Harlen said. And you know, when you're in the backcountry, you make plans, everyone leaves at 8, and your group doesn't magically grow from 4 to 8 in the backcountry. And this is backcountry terrain, and it's just with the lift access, it's a important dynamic that is tough to manage sometimes. And just, you know, you can't be afraid of hurting people's feelings. You just have to be safe, and trying to limit those group numbers is key out there.
Yeah, some great points.
Yeah, I thought that was good, Karl. One thing I would add to that is the human factor, just because, you know, we're on a resort, there's a ton of people, you don't know who's above you. I'd say that's the biggest difference than the regular backcountry, is the human factor back in there.
And we had a follow-up here. I can't remember which one you said, but you referred to a checklist. So someone from the audience asked, what is the checklist every time you go in the backcountry? So what are your guys' checklists? And we'll start with, maybe let's start with Nicole. What's your backcountry checklist?
Okay, let's see. So obviously I have my essential gear, which is beacon, shovel, and probe. And that includes checking that my partner has the same things, or partners. It includes a beacon check for both me and my partner, checking our search and send functions. And then it also involves a route plan. Well, actually, I guess first we would discuss conditions. So we'd look at the avalanche forecast. We'd probably look at some recent observations, other people that have been wherever we're going recently. And then we would kind of make a plan based on that. And then we'd also make sure our maps are downloaded, whether I'm going into the side country or the back country. That's super important to me. And then from there, we'd probably, you know, start, if we're touring, we'd start walking, or we'd head out into the side country and kind of stop at the top somewhere in a safe spot and dig a pit or a hand pit and see if like what we read beforehand is still holds true, or if conditions have changed. And from there, we would decide whether we want to stick to our original route plan or modify based on what we're seeing. And that can happen throughout the entire time we're in the backcountry. constantly realizing that modification is okay and sometimes fully necessary. Hopefully I didn't miss anything in that checklist.
No, that sounds really good. So, come up with basically multiple plans and then evaluate them. And then make sure, the basics that you have rescue gear before you go, do the check at the trailhead to make sure you have it, and then keep reevaluating things to see what's changing from your baseline plan during the day. It makes a ton of sense to me. But Harlan or Karl, do either of you have any little added tricks that you guys do to make sure you're not forgetting something, or so that things don't fall through the cracks with group management or anything like that? And it's okay to say no.
I think Nicole's checklist is it's about as good as it gets.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We have another. I'm
That
sorry,
was-
go ahead, Nicole.
That was super thorough. Nicole did a great job, but yeah, I said it earlier too, it was just the beacon check I think is super important. A lot of people get errors on their beacons, and I think you can never check that too many times, double, triple check that, make sure you're picking up your friends. I mean, that's the simplest thing you can do. It's the most important thing I think you can do also.
Yeah, and making sure you do that check before you leave the resort. You don't want to do the check at the top of your line where you're already a few hundred feet down in there, where your only option is to post hole back out because you're lift accessing this terrain and don't have skins with you. And
Yeah.
I've had it at the trailhead where my beacon, where I was picking other people up, but one person wasn't picking me up. It was a BCA Tracker 2. I sat that day out, got in touch with BCA. They warrantied the beacon, and I was back out and back at it. But just being ready to turn around, and sometimes that sucks, but it's nowhere near as bad as how bad things can be if you don't have the right gear back there.
Yeah. No, it's pretty sobering. The Avalanche doesn't care if your beacon works or not, right? We have one here for this one is regarding maps, and it was addressed to Nicole, and then everyone else can give their point of view on it too. But can you share some basic go-to info for downloading maps and why that's important with slope angle, location, this and that? So what are you using for your, sounds like this is more geared towards phones, I would guess, but remote mapping apps and things like that?
Yeah, I pretty much solely rely on my phone at this point. And I like to have a variety of apps. I use Gaia for a topo map. It has a bunch of really useful layers, one of which is the slope angle layer. For example, out in the burn, you can pretty easily see where your safe ridges are. If you do get out somewhere and all of a sudden you see, instability and you don't like what you're seeing and you want to get down safely, can help you find those spots when you're out in the backcountry. I also like to have satellite maps, whether that's Google Earth or Onyx has a really good satellite map as well. Just to be able to reference terrain that I'm in and see it in a different perspective, and then downloading them just because you don't know if you're going to have service out there wherever you are. You most likely won't. Anyone want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's super important to practice with those maps as much as you can and start to learn, make sure you're looking at the topo lines before you get there, and then seeing how that terrain looks and doing that on a daily basis, and just helps you read those maps better and better, and also realizing that there can be a little bit of variability between what the map's saying and what is actually going on. So even if the slope angle says that it's not an Avi path, but you get there and it's over 28 degrees, then, being able to adjust with that. But yeah, just practice with those maps. I really love Gaia. I use that app probably more than any. And yeah, pretty awesome that we have all those tools right at our fingertips. We're lucky.
Anyone else have anything to add on the mapping stuff?
CalTopo is pretty sweet website. You can kind of map your route and see closer details a little bit on the bigger screen, and then you can actually transfer that over to your Gaia or a Venza. That works both really well too. Yeah, something else to add to it.
Yeah, at the Avalanche Center, we're kind of a mix, and we're always kind of trying new things. Some of us are tech geeks. That's not me, but some of us are. But between Gaia, Onyx, and Caltopo, I think those are the three that we've been playing with the most. All three of those. And you know, there's so much good stuff out there now. They all have their pros and cons. I think one important thing is that they're great for giving you an awesome general sense of the terrain and whether you're going to be an avalanche terrain or not. But you can't use them to like micro navigate and say, okay, yeah, it shows that I'm staying in the yellow and never getting in the orange or the red on my route if you're trying to go up or down, because they're going to miss some smaller terrain features that are still big enough to potentially kill you. That was a contributing factor to an avalanche involving an avalanche class in the San Juans a few years back. So they're a great tool, but you can't just blindly navigate from them. It's kind of like if you're an EMT and they tell you to treat the patient, don't treat the machine. And if the machine's telling you to shock the person who's talking to you while they're standing there, you don't press send and shock them with a defibrillator. That was in the old days when you used to actually push the button before they were all fully auto, but same thing, you know, pay attention to the terrain. It's a really valuable tool, but it's not the end all, the mapping functions. We're going to kind of circle back to a question that we've had in the hopper here for a little while. And this is a challenging one. We'll start with Skooter, because he's been kind of quiet here for a little while. So the question was an open question to the panel. Anyone can give their answer after, but the question is, who should be in charge of enforcing, educating people and groups making dangerous or bad decisions out there in the OB and side country? No one wants to be a cop, and everyone's out there after the same thing, but everyone suffers if it becomes a free-for-all. So I think, you know, what are your techniques for if it's a scary day out there, Skooter, and you as a ski patroller, snow safety person, see someone doing something that makes you nervous, you know, what are you doing at that point? And I think it'll be really interesting to hear both, you know, your and Nicole kind of combined perspective from the ski area and ski patroller point of view, and then Karl and Harlen too, because it's a really different situation.
I think we know when avalanche danger is high or extreme and the skiing conditions are looking really premium inbounds and out of bounds, that we'll try to put warning signs at the top of just to like kind of reiterate what the Avalanche Center is doing. But I think maybe a more organic approach to this is getting our community and backcountry skiers, the Karls and Harlens of our community, to begin to maybe talk to some of these people while they're beyond the ropes, you know, kind of out of our control, and politically and politely just making them aware of the risk that they've just assumed going beyond the ski area boundary. I'll leave it at that.
I'll just add to that a little bit. Over the years, I've started to realize that, well, this made me think of it with the part about no one wants to be a cop. And I've kind of realized that whether I'm in uniform or skiing on my day off, I feel an equal responsibility to talk to a person who I see out there that's clearly not prepared, or maybe doesn't even understand that they're going out of bounds. Because to me, if I see somebody that's putting themselves and others at risk, I'm going to say something. And there's a nice way to do that, and can just assume that they don't know and say, hey, do you know that you're out of the resort boundary right now? Do you know what that means and what the risks are? If you didn't intend to be out here, I can show you how to get back, or whatever it may be. But I think there's a nice way to do it, and we kind of all have a responsibility to do that.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. There's good cops and there's bad cops out there, and you can definitely kill them with niceness. So I think just easily letting them know and educating them, or nicely going about that way of asking where your pack is, or do you know what the conditions are, or do you know where you are? I've had an incident where tourists have followed me out of bounds and they just didn't know where they were. And you can nicely go about saying, this is where you are, you're off the mountain, like that's your way out. And yeah, I don't think you have to be mean about it, but I think it's important to definitely question people and make sure that they know what they're doing out there. And that's the kind of the whole point of this thing.
Karl, you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for all of us as locals and avid users of that terrain, we want to be part of a culture that prioritizes having gear out there, having at least a level 1 avalanche certification. And you know, if you can't fulfill those 2 requirements, you know, this just isn't the terrain for you. And if you go to other resorts, Mount Baker, Jackson, you know, they have more specific backcountry exit gates with beacon checkers and, you know, kind of bottlenecks to get in the backcountry. But it's very shunned out, you know, in places like that to even think about going out of bounds without a pack. And there are areas in Baldy, and there's so many different ways to access the side country that it's very common to see people in the backcountry without the proper gear and without the knowledge. And it's pretty easy to end up back there because you see a bunch of people going back there, and you see some people in front of you going back there without packs, and oh, they're doing it, well, I guess I can probably do it too. And you know, I hope as we evolve with our side country community here, that becomes a standard, that people just aren't in the backcountry without gear and without avalanche education. And like Harlen said, just be polite about it. And if you see someone without a pack, whether they're the same age as you, older than you, younger than you, just say, hey, where's your pack? Like, you know, you can say it in a nice way. And if one person says it, then maybe it doesn't go anywhere. But if you know, 3, 4, or 5 different people in a day are asking you where's your gear, high chance you're gonna want to get that gear. And you know, there is a high cost getting that gear. Beacons aren't cheap, backpack, shovel, probe, all that. But if you're on the mountain and you're already skiing, you know, go the extra mile, do whatever you can financially to get that gear and get that education. And let's have an awesome ski culture here with a great backcountry etiquette that everyone follows.
Cool. Well said. We've got a few live questions here we'll get to in 1 second. I know I was just going to add that an easy way for any out there in the audience, if you see folks who are obviously completely unaware of where they are and what's going on, or even people that you might know that are, an easy way to kind of clue them in is to say, hey, do you know that a couple people have had life-changing injuries and a couple people have been buried? So there have been at least 4 people in the last handful of years that have almost gotten killed out here and in avalanches. And that'll at least make them think about it, because then it kind of becomes real. And then Ben had something to say about this. So Ben from the Avalanche Center. Ben, are you there?
I'm right here. I guess I have a perspective to add that's a little bit different, kind of more a backcountry perspective. But with some frequency, I run into people doing things in the backcountry that, you know, it's hard to say that it's a good idea or it's a bad idea or it's highly risky or whatnot. But it's also hard to talk to people without them kind of putting up their barbs and having their ego walls block them from actually hearing what you're trying to say. And one of the few ways that I've found that is more effective is to say to somebody, hey, I'm gonna talk to you about this. I'm gonna mention this to you for me, not for you. Because if something happens to you and I don't say anything, I'm not gonna sleep for a long time. And I think that disarms people pretty well. And it gives them a little bit of pause, and you know, say your piece, tell them that maybe what they're doing isn't the best thing to be doing on that day, or that you think it isn't, because it's, you know, it's all a personal decision, obviously, and then walk away. And I've found that to be one of the few ways that I can actually talk to somebody in that sort of a position without them immediately just saying, I don't care, you don't know what you're talking about, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, no, that's a good strategy. We're going to shift gears a little bit. We're going to go to a call in here. We have Swanky using an older version of Zoom. Of course he's using an older version of Zoom. I need to promote you to be a panelist, Swanky. Here you go. Are you with us? Oh yeah. Oh, you need to unmute. We can't hear you. You can see the mute button on the bottom left. Press that one.
It's actually not Dave Swanky, it's his wife.
Oh, wow. Hi.
Hey, everybody. That's so funny because I hear so much through my husband, but I'm also a teacher in town and a mom of 2 teenagers. And my kids grew up skiing here, and we've been listening to the whole thing tonight. And first of all, as a teacher, I have to say that everybody who's talking tonight and is saying one thing, and that other people who are listening are like what I was when I was beginning to be a teacher. Everybody's talking acronyms. So like, everybody's has their acronyms. And so all the people who are here and new in town, and skiing is becoming a big thing. And after COVID, it's becoming a big thing. And everybody wants to know what's going on. And so, and as a teacher, I know that you kind of try to avoid not knowing the acronyms. So I'm listening to all you guys professionals tonight, thinking like that these guys are like, that you don't use your APV or so you know what I'm saying. But what I do want to say is that my husband, as a ski patroller, has been in inbounds avalanches. And my kids, who we taught to ski here, are now learning how to ski out of bounds. They're both in their 18 and 20s. And they've looked up to a lot of you guys that live here. And that was something that when the boys were little, we just told them that, whatever the best that we are going to teach you, this is the best thing you can do. But what we couldn't do is we couldn't teach them what your best friend is doing. So here's the thing is that I don't know if Scooter brought this up or not tonight, but I remember the boys used to have, there's an in-terrain, a park for a beacon park. Did Scooter bring that up tonight?
Not yet.
He did?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, well, so here's what I remember is that here's the biggest thing. So as a teacher and a mom here in this town and seeing like my kids grow up here, and I still worry, and then my son's home from college, I still worry every day. Like he goes and he knows what he's doing, but I think that we talk about using your beacons and turning them on and having your batteries fresh. But if you don't know how to use your beacon, you know what I'm saying? So I would like, if it's still going on and there's, I don't know if there's a lot of people listening from out of town, but if there's still the beacon park that you can practice, it's like going to the bowling alley. It's super fun. Like you're out there and you can go find beacons and you're learning how to use that. That's the best thing you can do. And you're having fun. And then you know what you're doing, because you can have all the things that everybody's talking about. But I think what we're talking here is we're talking about the amount of people that are here. And I know being part with Dave, listening to the people who are in and out of these areas, like you call the living room. I love that. I love that comment, calling it the living room and leaving the living room. That these guys are not knowing what they need. I mean, if you're up there and you're like, oh, there's an opening right there, you think like you can go anywhere.
Hey, thanks so much. Scooter, do you want to quickly touch on where the 2 Baldy beacon parks are?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we were very fortunate through the Friends of the Avalanche Center to get a new beacon park last year in the spring, which we've installed just below the Lookout restaurant, kind of just a little bit to the north of I-80 or North Face Road. That's a BCA. It's a BCA beacon park. There's 8 different options. It's remote. You get a beeping signal when you hit a strike plate with your probe. It's pretty cool. It's on flat terrain. If you make a mistake, you can always kind of backtrack either on your skis or foot and correct yourself. And we've yet to install. We've been really busy the last 10 days since this winter has turned on us, but we have our old traditional beacon park on Christmas Ridge, which is a little older, antiquated, but it's certainly a great practice tool. But I will also say that just practicing with your beacon is a great tool, but if you're down to your beacon search, you've probably made a few mistakes like prior to your travel. So it's good to understand what the Avalanche Center is communicating to you, and knowing your terrain choices when you're out there skiing, and not just with your beacon, but proper shoveling techniques and probing techniques. So it's a complicated sport when you venture outside of the roads of the ski area. And I just want everyone to, especially probably our non-listening public that's out there, to somehow begin to understand that.
Yeah, well said, Scooter. Just like the best way to survive a car crash is to not get in one. It's the same thing with avalanches. Best way to survive an avalanche is to not get in one. Mistakes were made if you find yourself in one. So the other beacon park that is up and running right now is at the Baker Creek parking lot. For those of you that do want to practice and hone your skills, it's at the far end, north and west. It seems more north, but it's actually west. So on the Galena Summit side of the Baker Creek parking lot, and that one's up and running. And then there will be another one sooner than later in town in Ketchum at Atkinson's Park over by Hemingway School. So we're looking forward to that one being up and running. It's not quite there yet. Let's see. So we have, I think it's someone who's a call-in, 650-862. Can you unmute if you're still there? 650-862 blank, 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 blank. Going once. Going twice. All right, we'll move on to another live question here from Adam. Adam, if you're there, can you unmute and speak? Striking out. How about Adri? Adri, are you still there?
I'm here. I'm in the middle of kid bedtime, but I've enjoyed the discussion. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you. And feel free to come back on if we're still going when you're past the kid bedtime, and you can ask your question then.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Maybe mute me again.
Okay. All right, good stuff. So we'll go with another question that we have here, a written one. And let's see, we'll start with Harlen with this one. So how much do you weigh the consequences of an avalanche in a given avalanche path before making that final decision on whether to ski or ride it? Specifically in the Baldy OB.
Interesting. Well, I think knowing where the history of avalanche paths are really huge. So any chance to avoid the tops of those, or traveling quickly below them, just knowing where those are is extremely important. And any chance I get to avoid entering from that area, I will gladly take. And I mean, if the conditions are right, then it's a go ahead. But any chance that it's questionable, you get that intuition, gut feeling. I think that is a really important thing you kind of learn as you are in the backcountry a lot, to steer clear from places like that. But I try to avoid that, and if there's a way around it, I would prefer to take that over any other route into it.
Sounds good. Anyone else want to share their perspective on that? All right, so we have a kind of a quickie, easy question this year that I think is geared towards Skooter and Nicole. Well, one, have any one of you accessed the burn this year? And the answer is yes, at least in some way, shape, or form. I know for all of our panelists, whether they skied all the way down through it or just were poking around looking at the snow. But the main question is, have any of you noticed ski tracks off of the backside this year or any avalanche activity?
Our snowpack's a little different than what we have up north, which the Avalanche Center has been reporting on. We've been very fortunate in our area. We just haven't had as much snow or water on top of our existing snowpack. And we were also fortunate that we didn't have a lot of snow beginning with the first snowfalls of the season. So a lot different than what we're seeing up north and like above 9,000 feet. I'm not saying it's completely stable. There's a lot of spatial variability, but I've not witnessed any avalanches in or around Baldy lately or this season, but that's not to say that they aren't part of our future.
Sounds good. Thanks, Scooter. Let's see, any other live questions out there? I don't see any hands up. Ben, correct me if I'm wrong. Otherwise, we'll keep going with a few written questions here. So this one's from the patrol and rescue side of things. So how does the ski patrol deal with going into the out of bounds for a rescue when avalanche conditions are really sketchy? I mean, obviously a lot of the times if you have an accident, it's going to be sketchy. But on those days when, and I know from personal experience being up there when you were doing one of them, it was just really hair trigger where everything you touched was cracking and or sliding. So how does that whole system work? One, just getting the call out, and then two, how do you figure out what the best route in to find people is and get to them without endangering yourselves or the people that are already down there injured?
Nicole, you want to add in on this?
Yeah, sure. I think that I'll do my best shot, and then you can add in whenever you want later. But so basically we have an entire avalanche rescue plan. It's basically a big packet of information and all these procedures that we follow if there is some kind of accident outside of the resort boundary. And it starts with talking to the Forest Service and getting permission to even go on a rescue out there, because it's not in our operating plan. More than likely, depending on conditions, we would get permission. And then from there, we would take a witness who is telling us about an accident. If they're in person, we would take them back to the ski patrol shack, interview them, get all the information we could possibly get before heading out of bounds. Otherwise, we may be on the phone with somebody who's out there themselves. And then once we have the information we need, we would then evaluate whether or not it's safe to go out there, and also whether or not we have the resources. For example, if it's December 26th and we have record numbers in bounds on Baldy, that may not be feasible to take a lot of resources, which it will require outside of our operating area to go do a rescue for somebody that went under the boundary rope. From there, we have a whole procedure of what people we're going to send when, and we keep detailed notes of who's going out, so we can keep keep track of all our resources as well as time, and we alert other agencies in the valley of what we're doing in case we need help. But maybe Scooter, you take it from there and add in anything else that I missed.
Well, I mean, worker safety certainly plays into the equation. We're all type A personalities, I think, that work on the patrol. We want to go out there. We're pre-programmed or pre-wired to respond to a rescue situation like that. We want to help you, basically. But at the same time, there's a double-edged sword there. And I think that safety net that is assumed is there might play into people's decisions to duck under the rope. Like, rescue help is not that far away. If I'm hurt, I won't be hurt that long out there. And that's really not the case. We have 70 people on our patrol, and we want to make sure they all go home each night. And evaluating the conditions and hazards out there are certainly part of our protocol before responding to a wreck. So just keep that in mind if you're traveling under the ropes.
All right, so we have a couple interesting questions here. And this one would be for Karl or Harlen for starters, whichever one of you wants to take it. Could you talk about backside etiquette, i.e. leapfrogging? Because it's a crowded place, and just how you might interact, I guess in general, how you might interact with other groups who are skiing in the same general area as you. I think it's a really interesting topic.
Harlen, do you want to start on that one?
Sure, I'll give a shot at it. I think just communicating with the other group, knowing exactly where they're going, letting them know wherever it is that you're going, and maybe in your group also to, like, I don't know if you mean by leapfrogging, by stopping in the middle of maybe the run in a safe spot and getting eyes on the rest of the group if you guys are all skiing the same thing. I think that's a good way to go about safely going through the backcountry or out of bounds. But I think just communication, making sure everybody's on the same page. Also sharing radios channels is a really good way to do it too. And maybe getting in contact with the other group, so you can check in on that group and see if they've gotten to their place or their landing wherever they're finishing their run, make sure they're all safe, or letting them know that you're all safe or wherever you're ending, and then letting them know if you're going below them or however. But communication, that's where radios will play a huge part, and maybe mitigating that sort of confrontation of multiple groups or leapfrogging.
Anything to add with that one, Karl?
Yeah, I agree with all that. And, I think also, let's say, you have a party of 4. I had this just the other week, but 3 out of the 4 guys had radios. So we established this, every time we're out in the burn, but you have your leader and you have someone running sweep. So for our instance where we had one guy without a radio, we made sure that person wasn't our sweep. And then, we're also trying to break the ski up into chunks and just make sure if anybody, whether it's an avalanche or whether it's an ankle tweak, you want to make sure if someone needs help that there's someone above, and we don't get in a situation where we're having to post hole hundreds of feet back up to help someone. So if you are the person sweeping that day, making sure that you're skiing way more conservatively and just working with the group dynamic. And if things go wrong, how are we going to deal with this? Things can just go south so quick back there. So having a game plan, being conservative, defining who's going to be running in the front of the group, who's going to be running in the back, and making, finding those islands of safety where you can ideally keep eyes on everyone, for the most part, the groups I'm with, we generally stick to the ridges rather than the gullies, no matter how confident we are in the snowpack. Yeah, I think, and just knowing those start zones too, and Scooter touched on it earlier with, and you did as well, Scott, with how that rope line, it's not, you go beyond this rope and, you have a 50-foot buffer before you're in avalanche terrain. You can be 20 feet on the wrong side of that rope line and in avalanche terrain. And, I've seen it when it's high avalanche danger and people hear about people going out into the burn, and people are legitimately angry because they know if there is an accident back there, you have to put other people at risk to get help. And, yeah, there's so many dynamics to navigate back there, and it can be a little bit overwhelming. And that's what I want to get back to, just doing your summer homework. Get out there in the summer when there's no avalanche hazard, and if you really want to know that zone, start learning every ridge, start learning the place so you know it really well and can navigate it safely. And I mean, ideally, just get some good powder and have a ton of fun and not put anyone else at risk for your own pleasure and enjoyment.
Yeah, well said. No, those are some good points, Karl, like especially about the various roles in any group, having the first, the middle, and the sweep, and just making sure that everyone's clear on who is last, so you know who's doing what. Well, we're running out of time. We're down to the end here. We have a couple questions left. So we're going to end with a great question from Margot. I'll get to that next. That's going to be kind of a wrap up for each of the panelists. The one before that, I think this is going to be one for Scooter that we were wondering if it would come up a little bit. Imagine that. When I think of side country on Baldy, I think of the burn area that takes you into Board Ranch. What about the new sunrise terrain in the area under the lift area? Is that considered out of bounds, or is it considered in bounds? And is it controlled by the Sun Valley Ski Patrol?
Oh boy. The sunrise terrain, since we've adopted it last season, we certainly take a lot more time and effort to make sure it's skiable for our guests. And it's not just the local guests, it's the guests that are accessing Seattle Ridge. The Gun Ridge terrain is technically out of bounds. So we have a ski area, we have an inbounds closure around the top of lift 4, or our new Broadway lift, which we close at 2:45 because that's a hanging drainage. And we manage the terrain beyond the cooling tower gates or the ski area boundary as part of our terrain right now, but only with respect to safety to the skiers on Broadway and to the lift terminal at the bottom of the new lift 4. So we would hope that anyone traveling out in that terrain that crosses underneath the ski area boundary is cognizant of the risk they're assuming going outside the ski area, and that they need to have the tools and capability to self-rescue. At the same time, it's we're not that far away and are close, but we want people to understand that there is a ski area boundary there. There is a inbounds closure that we close at 2:45 that should, or by all means, should prohibit people from skiing under that boundary rope to get to the ski area boundary. I hope that answered the question. I know it's a bit of it's a mouthful, but I'm happy to field any other questions that are out there.
All right, thanks, Scooter. Yeah, it is a mouthful, and I think as as the ski area staff gets more familiar with it, you know, like you said, it's still evolving. It sounds like, you know, just various management techniques for new terrain. And I can say this coming from someone who worked at a ski area that kept expanding for the first 15 years I was there. It's rarely a finished product for the first few years that any new terrain is opened. That's standard. That's nothing unusual there. So I think we'll wrap it up. And I just sent to Skooter and Nicole, there is a question that'd be good for one of you folks to answer in the Q&A block that neither Ben nor I nor Chris are really well equipped to be able to answer that from Angela. So if one of you has the time to type that in before we get done here, but maybe we'll start with Harlen. And this is a great question from Margot. She asked, please share what you care most about this issue. So side country or out of bounds skiing at Baldy.
I think what my intro kind of stated was just I want to see people with the proper gear out there. I want to see people not by themselves for sure. And I want to see people that are hopefully educated and using the correct ethics and using the correct gear out there and not willy-nilly without a backpack or coming down by themselves on top of a group of people. And I want to see people just making good decisions and having fun for sure too, but just knowing that dropping underneath a rope is not okay without having the right backpack on and the beacon shovel probe. It needs to become the norm around here, and there's areas all over Colorado where if you drop a rope, then you get a ticket and from the National Forest Service, and it's illegal to even do that. So hopefully we can start treating these boundary lines with respect, and it won't have to come to something like that. So if we do a good job mitigating this issue, then we won't be going down that rabbit hole of more incidences and fatalities and injuries and putting our ski patrol at risk to go rescue them. So I think just making good decisions out there and treating each other with respect and having the proper gear on is the whole takeaway from this thing.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that you brought up that, you know, the respect for others and the rescuer safety. And it's something that Ben brought up too when he was speaking towards, you know, what he might say to other people, but it is a very real thing, you know, that if you as an individual get injured badly or killed in an avalanche, it's not just affecting you. It's something that Chris brought up in the last Digging Deeper. You know, it's affecting your friends, your family, people who deal with you that you're putting at risk. So it seems like a very personal decision, but it can have some pretty far-reaching implications if you're doing it at the wrong time. So yeah, well said, Harlen. Nicole?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off Harlen, I think probably the two things I would want to take away from this are education and ownership. So if you came away with this with a better understanding of what our out of bounds versus closed inbound terrain means, I think that's awesome and a huge start. Or if you took away from it, you know, how to better be prepared to, if you are going to go out of the boundary, that's great. And then from an ownership perspective, just understanding that we all love Baldy and we all love what it has to offer, both inbounds and out of bounds, and we need to respect that and respect each other, use it properly.
Thanks a ton, Nicole. Let's see, I want to make sure that I don't have the final word. I have one thing to say on this. The final word, I think, should probably come from Karl or Skooter. You guys can do a virtual Rochambeau to see who gets the last word. But for me, it's definitely that people understand the consequences of that terrain. That avalanche skiing and riding and snowmobiling in avalanche terrain is a numbers game. That at some point you're going to make a bad decision and you're going to get caught and you're going to have something happen to you that you didn't expect to or didn't want to have happen. And the goal is that when that happens, that it's an oops and not a life-changing event. And so much of that terrain, it's going to be a life-changing event where I'd way rather take a ride in a 5-foot thick, big deep slab avalanche in alpine terrain that's 500 feet wide that fans out into a giant wide open bowl gradually, and you're going to end up on the surface and not get plowed through trees and over cliffs, compared to taking my chances in an 18-inch thick slab that drills me through the trees over there. So that place really scares me. One thing Karl asked me earlier, how many times have you been back there? Have you ever had a close call? And I've been there 4 times, once for fun and 3 times to look at accidents, and that's it. So it's I have a pretty short fuse, very little bandwidth for going into terrain like that unless I absolutely have to, just because the consequences are so high. If you make a mistake, there's very little margin. Maybe it's because I'm old and cautious and I'm an old stogie, but give me the Alpine any day compared to that kind of stuff. Now who lost the Rochambeau? So who's going next out of the Scooter?
I think Scooter's gonna have to close it out because
I know. Let's tag team this, Karl, because I think you have some pearls of wisdom to shoot out there as well.
Well, I'll go off what you were talking then about earlier about just the goal is to never use your gear out there. If you're at the point where you're getting your beacon out, you've really made some mistakes, and this is an area where you want to go and not make mistakes. And Harlen really hit the nail on the head. I mean, it's a privilege that we have to have this amazing terrain, but it's also it's very high consequence terrain. And it's amazing that fire happened in 2007 and we have a perfect track record of 0 fatalities in this terrain. And for myself getting involved in this conversation, that's my number one goal, is to keep that perfect track record. And like Scott said, it's good we've had some oops out there, but not full on life-changing events. And that place is dangerous and can bite you. And I don't want to see anyone in this community, whether they're a local or an out of towner, get in trouble back there. And so just please, acknowledge how much of a privilege that it is, and let's all be safe. And if you don't know what you're doing, just please don't go back there. And if you do it safely. And, it's all thanks to Sun Valley Ski Patrol that it's even an option for us to ride those lifts and have that access. And yep.
No, that's well said, Karl and Harlen. A lot of respect for both of you. And it's not the Sun Valley Ski Patrol's. We can't take credit for that. It's it's Sun Valley Resort. It's what they put in their ski area recreational boundary and their open boundary policy. I'm afraid that we're maybe just talking to a local audience and not reaching out to the people that really need to know this information. And I think one of the cool things that kind of transpired in our previous pre-Zoom meeting was talking about the organic education coming from the folks that are skiing out there, that can begin to reach out to these people, because these folks that are accidentally, I won't say accidentally, that they're accessing this terrain with maybe a lesser skill set, will benefit from your posse and Harlen's posse and all the others that are skiing out there. Just like a little heads up, that'll go a long way, I think. And then we will, as a resort and as a ski patrol, always solicit feedback. especially from the people that are using that terrain, in terms of ways we can help better educate. So I'll leave it with that.
Well said. Thank you, Scooter.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scooter. And so everyone knows, both panelists and the those out in the audience, this is recorded, so it'll be, you know, available for viewing on the YouTube channel, the Sawtooth Avalanche Center YouTube channel, in a few days. Usually takes us a few days to get that up, but we're happy to get that link to anyone who wants it. So you can email us at info@sawtoothavalanche.com if there are people that you want to make sure see this, who you ride with, or you're worried about, or anything like that, or you want to get out to your organizations, then please do email us, and we'll make sure you get that link, or you can just send them to the YouTube channel, and there's a separate folder there, or playlist for the Digging Deeper videos. So then we had a couple questions as we're wrapping things up here about the poll results, if we can post them somewhere somehow. And I had asked Ben and Chris what they thought about that. Do either of you guys want to touch on that? Something that we can say on how we can share those results somehow with folks? Ben or Chris?
I think it'd be, yeah, a great thing to share those with folks. We could put together, I mean, I'm trying to think the best way to do it. Maybe we'll just think on it for a day and figure out the best way to get that out to everybody and do that. But I think that'd be interesting to have those shared, just kind of response to those questions.
Yeah, sounds good. We'll figure out a way to do it, and we'll make sure that the link to it is widely distributed via, you know, social media and other ways. So any of the folks that asked us that, hopefully you're still out there, and I'll text the ones that contacted me directly. So we'll let you know about what we can do to share those results, because I think there will be some interesting information there for sure. Well, with that, I think it's a wrap, and I just want to thank our panelists so much. This was awesome that you guys are willing to share your time, expertise, knowledge, perspectives. Some really cool stuff, just hearing all these, you know, really diverse perspectives on what is a really interesting topic back there, the skiing outside of the ski area boundary at Baldy. And huge thanks to the Sun Valley Ski Patrol and Sun Valley Resort, our official Zoom sponsors. We can't do it live right now. Hopefully old Omicron runs its course before Theta and Zeta get here, and maybe this thing will be something in the past. But you know, thanks a ton to all of you, Karl, Nicole, Harlen, and Scooter, for your time and the effort you put into this tonight.
Thanks for having us, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you all as well.
All right. With that, back to you, Amy.
Yeah, thanks so much, Scott. And thanks again, Scooter, Nicole, Karl, and Harlen, and everyone who tuned in tonight. And just to reiterate, if you don't have the experience or knowledge to go in the backcountry for skiing, but you're curious and want to learn, join the Friends of the Avi Center for an Intro to Avalanches presentation on January 6th at 6 p.m. You can go in person at the Ketchum Fire Department, or you can tune in on Zoom, just like we did tonight. So there's options based on what you're interested in. And then you can also join us for a field day, either January 8th or 9th, but you have to go to the Intro to Avalanches in order to sign up for the field day. And we do a lot of preaching on getting the forecast and getting the gear. And this is the presentation that will provide the intel on how to do that safely. So even if you took an avalanche course 10 years ago, you might feel like an expert, but experts are still tragically getting caught in avalanches. So never get complacent with practicing your skills, from navigation, group communication, rescue skills, and more. Just like everyone reiterated tonight, we all could use refreshers every single year. So you can find out what different courses we're teaching by going to sawtoothavalanche.com. And we also share information on courses that are going on in other areas throughout our state of Idaho. So be sure to follow the forecast and our event calendar, take a formal avalanche course, sawtoothavalanche.com. And you can also get this information by following us on social media at SawtoothAvi. Share what you see in the backcountry by tagging us as well, or by submitting a formal observation on the website. And I'd also like to send another huge thank you on behalf of everyone at the Avalanche Center to the good people at Sun Valley Resort and the Sun Valley Ski Patrol for being our virtual host for the evening. The Ski Patrol put in a lot of effort to mitigate avalanche hazard and open up a lot of great terrain so that we can ski and ride safely within the resort. So be sure to say thank you to them if you see them, or buy them a beer if you see them out and about. And if you'd like to watch the recorded versions of past Digging Deeper series, you can do so on our YouTube channel. Just search Sawtooth Avalanche, and you can tune in for the next Digging Deeper series. It's running every other week on Wednesday, so January 12th will be the next one. And you can catch all that info at our social media or on the website. So thanks everybody, and Happy New Year. See you later.